Steel screams against steel in a chaotic roar. This is the brutal reality of a medieval battlefield, a world defined by the weapons that clashed upon it. We are going to journey through the 25 essential weapons that shaped these conflicts, but we will do more than just list them. You will discover the hidden stories and the unsolved mysteries behind their creation and their use, understanding not just what they were, but why they changed history. How did a simple wooden bow humble an army of armored knights? What was the true purpose of a weapon designed not to kill, but to capture? By the end, you will see the medieval world not as a vague fantasy, but through the hardened steel that forged it. What single weapon do you believe truly defined the age of knights and castles? Perhaps no other object embodies the medieval knight more than the longsword. This was far more than a simple bar of sharpened steel. It was a masterpiece of balanced design and personal expression. Often called a hand and a half sword or a bastard sword, its longer grip allowed a knight to use it with one hand on horseback or two hands on foot, making it astonishingly versatile. The blade itself was a work of cunning geometry, with a central ridge called a fuller that was not a blood groove, but a way to lighten the weapon without sacrificing strength. This careful balance meant it could deliver devastating cleaving blows with its edge, yet its tapered point was perfect for precise, lethal thrusts into the gaps of an opponent's armor. And above the blade, the hilt formed a distinct cross. This cruciform shape was not accidental. It transformed the weapon into a sacred symbol, a representation of a knight's faith and his sworn duty. Wielding it was a complex science, a martial art documented in detailed fencing manuals from masters like Liechtenauer and Fiore. These were not simple brawling guides, but intricate systems of combat that treated the longsword almost like a living partner in a deadly dance. This deep connection between warrior and weapon gave rise to legends of named blades like the mythical Excalibur, swords said to be imbued with power and destiny. But the true mystery of the longsword lies not in magic, but in the sheer skill required to bring its elegant, deadly potential to life. While the longsword was a knight's elegant companion, the battle axe was the instrument of raw, undeniable power. It did not rely on finesse or subtle thrusts, but on overwhelming force capable of shattering shields and splitting armor with a single, thunderous blow. Its story begins not in the courts of kings, but with the Vikings, who carried their famed broadaxes on longships that raided and settled across Europe. For them, the axe was a tool for life and an engine of war, a terrifying symbol of their relentless strength. This legacy was inherited by warriors like the English Huscarls, the elite household troops who formed the formidable shield wall at the Battle of Hastings. In their hands, the long-hafted Dane axe became a whirlwind of destruction, its massive crescent-shaped blade capable of cleaving through enemy lines from a shocking distance. But the axe was not a simple instrument. Its design evolved with cunning purpose. Some heads featured a narrow, hammer-like back spike, designed not for cutting but for punching through chainmail and helmets. Others had a bearded shape where the lower edge of the blade hooked down, allowing a warrior to pull an opponent's shield aside, creating a fatal opening for a follow-up strike. Wielding such a weapon effectively required immense physical strength and relentless stamina. The momentum of a heavy axe head was difficult to control and left the user exposed if a swing missed its mark. This is what made legendary axe wielders like the Viking hero Ragnar Lodbrok or the Saxon champion Hereward the Wake so feared. Their very presence on the battlefield a testament to almost superhuman vigor. The true mystery of the battle axe is not found in its construction, but in the sheer human will it took to swing it again and again in the chaos of combat, turning a simple piece of forged iron into the very definition of brute force. Yet for all the raw power of the axe, the true king of the medieval battlefield was a far simpler tool. The spear, a point on a long stick, was the most common and arguably the most important weapon of the era. Its design was ancient and brutally effective, placing a sharp metal tip at the end of a wooden shaft that could be twice the height of a man. This simple geometry granted a tremendous advantage, allowing a foot soldier to strike an opponent from a distance, keeping them safely beyond the reach of swords and axes. It was a weapon of the common man, cheap to produce and relatively easy to train with, which is why it equipped the vast peasant levies that formed the bulk of most armies. But do not mistake its simplicity for weakness. In the hands of a disciplined force, the spear was utterly devastating. Massed formations of spearmen, like the Scottish schiltron, would present a near impenetrable wall of bristling points to a charging enemy. Against a cavalry charge, these formations were like a steel-edged forest, a terrifying sight that could break the momentum of the most heavily armored knights. The spear was also the knight's own primary weapon from horseback, evolving into the mighty lance. This specialized version was heavier and stouter, designed to be couched under the arm to transfer the full force of a galloping horse into a single armor-shattering impact. It was the lance that defined the iconic image of the joust, a test of skill and courage, but on the battlefield it was a tool of pure, focused destruction. From this versatile foundation, the spear branched into a whole family of sophisticated polearms, each adapted for a specific task on the ever-evolving battlefield. The true, enduring mystery of the spear is not how it worked, but why such a fundamentally simple object remained the unchallenged backbone of warfare for centuries, outlasting countless more complex and expensive inventions. That simple spear, when placed in the hands of a mounted knight, became a weapon of terrifying focus. The lance was the ultimate expression of shock combat, a tool designed to concentrate the mass and velocity of a charging warhorse into a single, catastrophic point. Its construction was deceptively simple, a long and stout shaft of seasoned ash or cedar, often reinforced with a metal vamplate to protect the knight's hand. But its true power was unlocked by a specific technique, the couched lance. A knight would tuck the weapon firmly under his arm, locking his entire body into a single, rigid extension of the horse's momentum. This transformed man and steed into a living projectile, capable of striking with a force that could unhorse a rival or punch straight through a shield. This was the defining moment of a cavalry charge, a thunderous impact that could shatter an enemy line before the first sword was even drawn. Beyond the battlefield, the lance was the star of the joust, the glittering centerpiece of the tournament. These events were far more than mere sport. They were vital training grounds, a way for knights to hone their aim, balance, and courage at full gallop in a controlled, though still dangerous, environment. A successful joust required impeccable timing and nerve, skills that were directly transferable to the chaos of war. The mystery of the lance lies in this duality. It was both a ceremonial symbol of chivalric honor and a brutally efficient engine of war, its polished wood and fluttering pennants masking the raw, concussive power it was built to deliver. Against the hardened shell of plate armor, the sharp edge of a sword could ring uselessly. This is where the mace found its brutal purpose. It was a weapon of pure physics, designed not to cut or stab, but to crush. Its business end was a heavy head of iron or steel, often shaped with flanges, which were protruding ridges or blades that concentrated the force of a blow into a smaller, more devastating area. When swung with power, this head did not need to pierce a knight's gleaming plate. It simply had to transfer its immense kinetic energy through the metal. The result was a deafening clang, followed by a deep dent that could bind armor plates together, trap a limb, or transmit the shock directly into the wearer's body, breaking bones and causing severe internal injury without ever drawing a drop of blood. This very quality gave the mace a curious moral standing in medieval warfare. Because it could kill through concussive force alone, it was sometimes seen, paradoxically, as a more righteous weapon. Clergymen who fought, like the warrior bishops of Europe, were often depicted wielding maces. This was partly due to a church decree that discouraged them from shedding blood, a rule loosely interpreted to mean they should avoid edged blades. The mace became their sanctioned tool of war, a symbol of holy authority that could smite the enemy while technically complying with religious law. For knights, it was a practical and respected sidearm, a reliable answer to the problem of increasingly sophisticated armor. The mystery of the mace is not in its simple, brutal form, but in its dual identity as both a crude bludgeon and a symbol of divine judgment on the battlefield. The mace was a brutal answer to armor, but the war hammer perfected the formula. It was a weapon of two faces, a duality forged in steel for a single purpose, to defeat a knight in his full suit of plate. On one side of its head was a compact, flat hammer face, designed to deliver the same concussive, bone-breaking force as a mace. But opposite this blunt instrument was a sharp, often curved spike like a crow's beak. This spike was the key. A knight's armor was made of smooth, curved plates to deflect slashing blows, but it had vulnerable points, joints, and visors. The war hammer's spike was made to target these weaknesses with precision. A warrior could hook the spike around an opponent's shield to pull it down, or with a swift, powerful thrust, drive the point into the gap between helmet and gorget or through the visor's sight. It was this combination of blunt force trauma and precise piercing that made the war hammer so feared in the 14th and 15th centuries. It was not a peasant's weapon, but a tool for knights and professional men at arms who faced other fully armored opponents on the battlefield. Its elegant, deadly form is preserved in countless medieval illustrations and chronicles, a testament to its widespread use. The mystery of the war hammer lies in its cold, mechanical efficiency. It represents a shift in thinking where defeating armor was no longer about raw power alone, but about applying that power with surgical, ruthless intelligence. No weapon from the medieval era is as instantly recognizable or as shrouded in modern myth as the flail. Its design was deceptively simple, a wooden handle connected by a length of chain to a heavy, often spiked metal ball. The image is unforgettable, a whirlwind of spinning steel that seems to defy an opponent's defenses, and that was precisely its theoretical advantage. In a clash against a shielded foe, a conventional weapon like a mace would strike the shield and stop, but the flail, with its flexible chain, could theoretically whip around the shield's edge, striking the enemy's head or arm from an unexpected angle. This potential to bypass a defender's guard has made it a favorite in fantasy and film, but its actual historical use is one of the great unresolved debates among historians. While art from the period does occasionally depict knights and infantrymen wielding flails, surviving examples in museums are incredibly rare, and detailed accounts of their battlefield use are even scarcer. This leads to a compelling question: was the flail a common, terrifying weapon, or was it a niche tool that existed more in legend than in massed ranks of soldiers? The answer likely lies somewhere in between. Its effectiveness came with a terrifying cost. That same unpredictable, whipping motion that could snake around a shield was incredibly difficult to control. In the tight, frantic press of a melee, a missed swing or a poorly timed dodge could send the spiked ball rebounding back toward its own user with lethal force. Imagine trying to control a deadly pendulum in a crowd, where one wrong move could shatter your own arm or crack your own skull. This immense risk required immense skill and space to operate, making it a weapon for a daring individual, not for a disciplined formation. The true mystery of the flail is not whether it could be used, but how often any warrior was truly willing to gamble their own safety on its chaotic and unforgiving nature. Chaos reigns when the knight's primary weapon fails. In the desperate, grappling press of bodies after a charge, with swords too long to wield and hammers too slow to swing, survival depended on a final, intimate tool. The dagger was the medieval warrior's ultimate insurance policy, a last resort for when combat dissolved into a brutal embrace. Far from a simple backup, it was the essential instrument for a deadly martial art known as half-swording. A knight would grasp his own longsword by the blade, turning it into a short, controlled spear, and use his dagger in his other hand. The goal was to wrestle an armored opponent to the ground, pin them, and find a fatal opening. This is where the dagger's specific design became horrifyingly clear. The rondel dagger was perfected for this grim task. Its name came from the round, disc-shaped guards that reinforced its hilt, and its blade was a rigid, sharply tapered spike of steel, often triangular in cross-section. This form had a single, gruesome purpose: to thrust with immense force into the vulnerable gaps of plate armor, the mail at the armpit, the vision slit of the helmet, or the thin space between helmet and collar. It required precision over power, a cold, calculated strike in the heat of battle. Yet the dagger's story extends far beyond the mud and blood of the battlefield. It was a constant companion in daily life, a universal tool for eating, carving, and 100 other tasks. Worn openly on the belt, its quality and decoration signaled a person's wealth and status, from a peasant's simple utility knife to a nobleman's ornate, gilded heirloom. But this everyday familiarity also gave the dagger its most enduring and sinister reputation, that of the assassin's weapon. Its small size and ease of concealment made it the perfect instrument for betrayal, a fact immortalized in the most famous murder in English history, the killing of King Edward II. The dark mystery of the dagger, then, is this profound duality. It was at once a necessary tool for survival, a symbol of noble rank, and the chosen weapon for the most intimate and treacherous acts of violence, forever linking the mundane with the mortal. While the dagger settled matters at close quarters, another weapon threatened the knightly class from a shocking distance. The crossbow was a machine of terrifying simplicity and profound consequence, a tool that could launch a heavy bolt with enough force to punch through a knight's prized armor from over 100 yards away. Its power did not come from a warrior's strength, but from its mechanical design. The bow itself was made of steel, far too stiff for any man to pull back by hand. Instead, a user would place the weapon on the ground, hook his foot into a stirrup at the front, and use both hands to draw the thick string back until it locked into a simple but sturdy nut mechanism. For the most powerful models, this process required a separate tool, a claw-like device called a cranequin or a windlass, which used gears and levers to winch the string back with excruciating slowness, but with immense force. This slow, methodical reloading was the crossbow's greatest weakness, but its release was devastating. With a simple pull of a trigger, the latch would release, and the stored energy would fire a short, thick bolt or quarrel on a flat, accurate trajectory. This was a weapon that required minimal training to use effectively. A peasant could be taught to load and aim a crossbow in a matter of weeks, while mastering the longbow took a lifetime of practice. This very accessibility made it a threat to the established social order. Why should a low-born soldier with no chivalric virtue and little combat skill be able to strike down a noble knight who had spent his entire life and fortune on arms and training? This question so troubled the medieval elite that in the year 1139, the Second Lateran Council of the Church officially banned the crossbow, at least against Christians, declaring it hateful to God and unfit for use among the faithful. Of course, the ban was widely ignored because the tactical advantage was simply too great. The crossbow became a staple of siege warfare and a key component of many armies, its cold, mechanical efficiency representing a shift away from warrior skill and toward industrial power on the battlefield. The mystery it presents is not about its function, but about the social fear it provoked, forcing a society built on martial nobility to confront a future where a single, well-aimed shot from a common man could undo centuries of tradition. The crossbow was a machine that could be mastered in weeks, but the English longbow demanded a lifetime. This was not merely a weapon, it was a national institution, a 6-foot stave of yew wood that required a physical transformation of the men who wielded it. To draw its string, an archer needed to exert a force of over 100 pounds, a strength built not in a gym but through daily practice from boyhood. English law actually mandated that all able-bodied men regularly train with the longbow, ensuring a constant supply of these elite soldiers. Their bodies bore the marks of their craft, with skeletons from the period showing enlarged left arms and often twisted spines, a permanent deformity from a life spent controlling this immense power. The payoff for such dedication was a weapon of terrifying range and rate of fire. A skilled longbowman could loose 10 or more arrows a minute, creating a steel-tipped hailstorm that darkened the sky. At the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, this theory became a brutal reality. A vastly outnumbered English army, consisting largely of longbowmen, faced the flower of French chivalry. The French knights, bogged down in rain-soaked mud, were met with a relentless, withering volley. The arrows did not just kill men, they killed horses, creating a chaotic, living barricade of fallen steeds and armored knights that shattered the French advance. The longbow's heavy bodkin point arrows were designed for one thing, to pierce armor, and at close range they could punch through plate steel. The sheer volume of fire turned the field into a slaughterhouse, a stunning victory that cemented the longbow's legendary status. Yet for all its fame, a profound mystery surrounds these archers. While chronicles record their deeds, the physical evidence of their lives is strangely scarce. Finding the mass graves of the men from Agincourt has become an archaeological quest, a search for the very bones that would tell the true story of the strength and sacrifice that made this simple piece of wood the most feared weapon on the continent for over a century. While the longbow dominated the open field, a knight's most trusted companion in the press of a melee was a different blade entirely. The arming sword was the quintessential one-handed knightly weapon, a double-edged sidearm designed to be wielded alongside a shield. This was not the specialized hand and a half-longsword of later centuries, but a perfectly balanced tool for both cutting and thrusting, a versatile extension of a warrior's will. Its evolution tells a story of changing combat. It grew from the Viking swords of the earlier medieval period, which were primarily slashing weapons, but over time, its blade became more tapered and its point more acute, allowing for effective thrusts against improving armor. This balanced design made it a knight's constant companion, both on and off the battlefield. From the dusty plains of the Holy Land during the Crusades to the muddy fields of France, the arming sword was there, hanging from the belt of nobles and men-at-arms alike. It was a personal possession, often named and passed down through generations, its hilt and pommel reflecting the owner's wealth and status. Unlike the longsword, which required 2 hands and space to swing, the arming sword worked in perfect concert with a shield, creating a formidable defensive and offensive combination. A knight could block an attack with his shield and deliver a swift, decisive counter-strike with his sword in a single, fluid motion. This elegant partnership defined close-quarters combat for centuries, a dance of steel and wood where the arming sword was the sharp, final word. But what happens when the fight moves from the open field to the cramped, shadowy corridors of a castle under attack? The arming sword was a master of balance, but its cousin was a specialist in sheer force. Meet the falchion, a blade that looked more like a butcher's cleaver than a knight's elegant sidearm. With its broad, single-edged blade that often widened toward the tip, the falchion sacrificed the delicate thrust for one overwhelming purpose, to deliver a chopping blow of terrifying power. Its weight was distributed forward, making it act like a heavy axe in the form of a sword, capable of hacking through limbs and smashing through lighter armor with a single, decisive stroke. This brutal efficiency made it a favorite for cavalrymen, who could use its weight and the momentum of their horse to add even more force to a downward slash against infantry. Yet its shorter length and manageable size also made it a devastating tool for foot soldiers fighting in the cramped chaos of a siege or a ship-boarding action. The falchion presents us with a fascinating contradiction. While its function was raw and visceral, many of the few surviving examples are things of exquisite beauty. The Conair's falchion, for instance, is a legendary English blade said to have been used to slay a dragon, and its craftsmanship is ornate. Others feature beautifully engraved blades and hilts inlaid with gold and silver, proving they were prized possessions of wealthy warriors, not just the crude tools of common brutes. This blend of brutal utility and high art is the true mystery of the falchion. Why would a nobleman invest such incredible craftsmanship into a weapon designed for such a straightforward, violent task? The answer may lie in a simple truth. On the medieval battlefield, effectiveness was the highest form of elegance, and the falchion's ability to end a fight with one clean, overwhelming cut was a brutal kind of beauty all its own. The falchion's brutal elegance was a solution for close, personal mayhem, but the battlefield also demanded a weapon with reach and ruthless versatility. This need was answered by the halberd, a Swiss invention that was essentially an entire arsenal on a single, long pole. Its head was a masterwork of practical design, combining three distinct tools forged into one. On top sat a fearsome axe blade, capable of delivering a cleaving blow with the power of a dedicated battle axe. Opposite this blade was a sturdy spike, as long as a dagger, perfect for thrusting with the focused power of a spear. But the true genius of the halberd was the hook, a curved protrusion on the back of the axe head. This seemingly simple addition was a cavalryman's nightmare. A disciplined halberdier could use that hook to catch a knight's armor, a saddle strap, or even a limb, and with a powerful pull, unhorse the rider, sending him crashing to the ground in a cacophony of clattering steel. Suddenly, the most feared warrior on the field was vulnerable, lying dazed and trapped in his own armor, ready to be finished with a quick thrust from the halberd's spike. This multifunctional nature made the halberd effective against every type of foe, from armored knights to lightly equipped infantry. Its success on the battlefield became the foundation of a military revolution. Swiss soldiers, organized into highly disciplined squares of halberdiers, became the most sought-after mercenaries in Europe. Their reputation for invincibility was built on the back of this one weapon, a tool that allowed them to break charges, hold lines, and dismantle enemy formations with cold, systematic efficiency. The rise of the Swiss mercenary companies and the political power they wielded is inextricably linked to the lethal, all-in-one design of the halberd. It was not just a polearm, it was a statement that on the modern battlefield, adaptability was the new king. The halberd was a soldier's tool for breaking formations, but for a knight fighting on foot against another knight, a more refined and deadly instrument was required. This was the domain of the poleaxe, the ultimate dueling weapon for a man encased in steel. In the hands of a master, it was not a crude bludgeon but a precision-engineered system, a balanced polearm that combined the best features of multiple weapons into one devastating package. Its head was a masterpiece of medieval smithing, typically featuring three distinct elements on a single, stout shaft. On one side was a sharp, often curved axe blade, perfect for delivering a powerful cleaving blow. Opposite the blade was a solid hammerhead, designed for the same concussive, armor-denting force as a war hammer. And crowning the entire assembly was a long, sturdy spike, projecting straight up like a spear point, ready for swift, penetrating thrusts. This triple-threat design gave a knight an answer for every possible situation in a close-quarters duel. He could hook a limb or weapon with the axe blade, deliver a stunning, bone-jarring blow with the hammer, or execute a lightning-fast lunge with the top spike to target a vulnerable gap in his opponent's defenses. This last technique was the poleaxe's true purpose. In the context of a judicial duel or a formal foot combat between two armored nobles, victory was not about hacking wildly. It was about control, leverage, and that one perfect strike. Combatants would aim for the tiny openings in plate armor, the vision slit in the helmet, the armpit, or the back of the knee. A successful thrust from the poleaxe spike into one of these points could end the fight instantly. These duels were brutal, methodical affairs, more akin to a lethal wrestling match than the swinging melee of a battlefield. The fighters would use the weapon's long haft to control distance, trip their opponent, and create the single, fatal opening they needed. The poleaxe represents the pinnacle of armored personal combat, a weapon whose elegant complexity stands in stark contrast to its singular, brutal function, to defeat another knight in the most personal and honorable way possible with cold, calculated skill. The poleaxe was a knight's personal solution, but the common infantryman needed a tool with sweeping reach and slashing power. The glaive delivered exactly that, a polearm that mounted a large, single-edged blade onto a long wooden shaft, creating a weapon that looked like a sword on the end of a pole. Its blade was often beautifully curved, designed for one primary purpose: to deliver devastating, sweeping cuts against multiple opponents. In the hands of a trained foot soldier, the glaive became a whirlwind of sharpened steel, its long reach keeping enemies at bay while its heavy blade could sever limbs and crush through lighter armor with ease. While effective in the chaotic press of a melee, its true strength was best displayed in more open formations, where a soldier had the space to build momentum for wide, arcing swings. This need for space meant that wielding a glaive effectively required significant training and discipline. A novice might easily overcommit on a swing, leaving himself dangerously off balance and exposed to a quick counterattack from a swordsman who ducked inside his reach. The most skilled users understood its balance perfectly, able to mix powerful slashes with quick, probing thrusts using the blade's point, making it a surprisingly versatile weapon in single combat. Beyond the battlefield, the glaive held a different kind of power. Its distinctive and imposing form made it a favorite symbol in medieval art and heraldry. You can see it depicted in illuminated manuscripts and carved into stone, often held by guards or saints, a symbol of martial authority and vigilant protection. It was a weapon that looked as formidable as it was, its elegant yet deadly form representing the perfect fusion of the swordsman's edge with the spearman's reach. Its legacy makes us wonder how many other seemingly simple polearms held such a complex identity, serving as both a practical tool of war and a powerful emblem of status and strength. While the glaive was a symbol of martial authority, the bill was a tool of the earth turned into a tool of war. This was the common man's answer to armored nobility, a polearm born not in a royal armory but in the humble countryside. Its design was brutally pragmatic, adapted directly from the agricultural billhook used for pruning trees and cutting brush. The military version simply mounted this familiar, curved blade on a long wooden shaft, but its modifications were lethally clever. The blade's sharp, inward curving edge was perfect for delivering deep, slicing wounds, but the bill's true genius lay in its array of hooks and spikes. Often, a hook projected from the back of the blade, and another spike might rise from the top, creating a multi-pronged head of terrifying versatility. In the hands of an English peasant militia, this simple tool became a knight's worst nightmare. A farmer could use the bill's hook to snag a charging cavalryman. With a powerful two-handed pull, he could unhorse the rider, sending him crashing to the ground. That same hook could latch onto the edge of a shield, yanking it down to expose the man behind it for a fatal thrust from a comrade. Against an opponent on foot, the bill could trip, disarm, and maim with a chilling efficiency that required little formal training. Only the strength and familiarity these men already possessed from their daily labor. This was its profound power. The bill was not a weapon they had to learn from scratch. It was an extension of their own world, repurposed for defense and rebellion. Its widespread use by English forces, particularly during the Wars of the Roses, cemented its reputation as a democratizing force on the battlefield. The bill allowed a levy of determined farmers to stand against professional men-at-arms, proving that in the right hands, a simple hook on a pole could be as deadly as the finest tempered steel. From the practical tools of the common soldier, we turn to a weapon of almost legendary proportions. The greatsword was a true giant among blades, a massive two-handed sword that stood taller than a man. This was not a weapon for a knight on horseback or for the chaotic press of a common melee. It was a specialized tool for elite infantry, men of exceptional strength and training whose sole purpose was to break the deadliest formations on the battlefield. The primary enemy of the greatsword was the pike, those long, bristling walls of spear points that dominated Renaissance warfare. A single swordsman could never hope to breach such a defense, but a greatsword wielder had a different strategy. He would use the sheer weight and momentum of his enormous blade to batter and beat the pike shafts themselves, hacking them aside or even severing their points, creating a breach in the enemy's defensive line for his comrades to surge through. Wielding such a weapon was a feat of athleticism. It required immense upper body strength and perfect footwork, not just to swing it, but to control its recovery after each massive, sweeping arc. Yet for all its size, it was a weapon of surprising nuance. Just above the crossguard, a section of the blade was left unsharpened. This area, called the ricasso, was key to its advanced techniques. The ricasso was often fitted with two small, protruding hooks known as parrying hooks. A fighter could slide one hand past the crossguard to grip the ricasso itself, his fingers protected by these hooks. This grip, a form of half-swording, transformed the greatsword from a sweeping bludgeon into a controlled, spear-like instrument for close-quarters combat. It allowed for precise thrusts and powerful blocks, turning the weapon's great length from a liability into a versatile advantage. These specialized warriors, like the German Doppelsolderners or the Scottish claymore-wielding Highlanders, were the shock troops of their day, their very presence on the field a declaration that no formation was unbreakable. What kind of man would choose such a demanding weapon, and what did it feel like to stand before a forest of enemy pikes, your only hope resting on the perfectly timed swing of a 6-foot length of steel? There was an art to piercing a knight's steel shell, and the estoc was its finest brush. This sword was a radical departure from the slashing blades of old, a weapon that abandoned any pretense of a cutting edge. Its blade was a rigid, needle-like spike, often triangular or even square in cross-section, designed for a single, brutal purpose: to punch through chainmail and find the gaps between plates of armor. It was the medieval equivalent of a can opener, a tool whose entire existence was dedicated to solving the problem of full-plate harness. In the hands of an armored knight, the estoc was not swung, it was placed. The technique was a refined form of half-swording, where the knight would grip the blade itself with his gauntleted hand, turning the long weapon into a short, controlled spear. This gave him immense leverage and pinpoint accuracy, allowing him to guide the stiff point with surgical precision into the visor's site, the armpit or the groin. He would put his body weight behind it, using the strength of his legs and back to drive the unsharpened steel through rings of mail or into the vulnerable flesh beneath. This was not a duel of flashing steel and ringing blows, but a grim, close-quarters struggle where victory went to the one who could control his opponent and land that one perfect thrust. The estoc's mystery lies in this paradox. It was one of the deadliest weapons ever devised against a fully armored man, yet to the untrained eye, it looked almost incomplete, a sword that had forgotten how to cut. Its power was not in its appearance, but in the cold, focused intent of the warrior who wielded it, a man who understood that the smallest opening could be the end of everything. While the estoc was a tool of precision for armored duels, a different sword ruled the deserts and plains of the Middle East. The scimitar, with its elegant, curved blade, was a weapon born from the saddle, a perfect fusion of form and function for the cavalrymen of the Islamic world. Its defining curve was not merely for beauty, it was a masterpiece of physics. As a rider charged past an enemy, the shape of the blade allowed it to slide along a target, drawing a long, devastating cut rather than simply chopping. This slicing motion, combined with the horse's own speed, could inflict a terrible wound with seemingly minimal effort, turning a swift pass into a lethal encounter. This design philosophy stood in stark contrast to the European straight sword, which was built for both the thrust and the chop, often from a more static, foot-based combat stance. The scimitar was a specialist, and its specialization made it terrifyingly effective in the hands of skilled horsemen like the Mamluks and the Ottoman Sipahis. For the Crusaders who faced them, these curved swords became symbols of an alien and fearsome martial culture. The very shape seemed exotic and deadly, a visual representation of a foe whose tactics and mobility were so difficult to counter. In the hands of a master, the scimitar was not just a weapon, it was an extension of a way of war that valued speed, fluidity, and overwhelming shock. Beyond its battlefield role, the scimitar held deep cultural and spiritual significance. Its curve was sometimes said to evoke the Islamic crescent moon, and its use was often romanticized in poetry and art as a symbol of justice and authority. This powerful blend of lethal efficiency and profound symbolism created an aura of mystery around the weapon, a mystery that only deepened the fear it inspired in those who saw its flashing arc descending upon them from the back of a galloping horse. A knight's charge could be shattered before it even began by a simple thrown stick. The javelin, a lightweight spear designed for hurling, was the skirmisher's weapon of choice, a tool for harassment and chaos that predated the sword and outlasted the axe in its usefulness. While the heavy spear was for holding a line, the javelin was for breaking one. Lightly equipped infantry, like the Moorish javelineers of Al-Andalus or the Gaelic warriors of Ireland, would carry a bundle of these spears into battle. Their role was not to stand and fight in a melee, but to run ahead of the main force, unleash a volley of sharpened points, and melt back into the ranks before the enemy could close. Against a tightly packed formation of enemy spearmen or a line of advancing knights, this hail of javelins was far more than a nuisance. It could wound horses, pierce shields, and most importantly, break the discipline of a shield wall as men instinctively flinched or raised their shields to block the incoming missiles, creating fatal gaps in their defense. This tactic was not confined to foot soldiers. Cavalry, too, mastered the art of the thrown spear. The Spanish Gynaetes, light horsemen who learned their craft fighting the Moors, were masters of this style. They would ride swiftly toward an enemy formation, each rider launching several javelins in quick succession before wheeling away, a constant, stinging cloud of steel that exhausted and demoralized their opponents long before the main battle was joined. The javelin story is one of persistence. While other weapons came and went with changing armor styles, this most ancient of tools remained a constant on the fringes of battle, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not the one that kills you, but the one that unravels your army's will to fight before a single sword is drawn. A thrown stone could be as deadly as a forged blade in the right hands. The sling, one of the oldest weapons in human history, was a simple but devastating tool on the medieval battlefield. Made from nothing more than 2 cords of leather or sinew and a small pouch, its power came not from its materials but from the physics of its use. A skilled slinger would place a smooth stone or a cast lead bullet into the pouch, whirl it overhead in a rapidly accelerating circle, and release one cord at the perfect moment. This action acted like a lever, launching the projectile at incredible speeds, often faster than an arrow. These lead bullets, sometimes inscribed with taunts or unit markings, could fracture bones, crush skulls, and dent armor at ranges exceeding 300 yards. This was not a child's toy. It was a weapon of war that required a lifetime of practice to master, its users developing an almost supernatural sense of aim and timing. For peasant levies who could not afford a sword or bow, the sling was an accessible and lethal equalizer. Yet its larger cousin, the staff sling, brought a new dimension to this ancient art. This weapon attached the sling's pouch to the end of a wooden staff. A soldier would grip the staff with both hands, swing it in a wide arc over his shoulder, and release, using the leverage of the pole to hurl much heavier projectiles. The staff sling became an essential tool in siege warfare. used to loft stones over castle walls or to throw containers of Greek fire and other incendiaries into enemy fortifications with far greater range and precision than a man could achieve by hand. This humble combination of cord and stick created a unique and persistent threat on the medieval battlefield, a reminder that sometimes the most ancient solutions remained brutally effective amidst the glitter of steel and the charge of knights. What other simple secrets from the past held such power, waiting to be rediscovered in the heat of conflict? While a common crossbow could threaten a single knight, a siege crossbow could dominate an entire battlefield. These were not handheld weapons, but massive engines of war mounted on castle ramparts or heavy wooden frames, designed to project terror over immense distances. The most famous of these was the ballista, a machine of ancient origin perfected in the medieval period. Its power did not come from a simple bent bow, but from a complex and brilliant system of torsion. Two thick bundles of sinew or animal hair were tightly wound into vertical springs, housed in a heavy wooden frame. Into each spring, a rigid arm was inserted. To fire the ballista, soldiers would use a windlass mechanism to winch a heavy rope back, drawing the two arms and their attached bowstring with excruciating slowness, storing a phenomenal amount of energy in those twisted sinew bundles. When the trigger was released, the arms would slam forward, hurling its ammunition with terrifying force and a deafening crack. This ammunition could be a giant iron-tipped bolt as long as a man is tall, or a rounded stone the size of a human head. The effect of such a projectile was not just physical but deeply psychological. A single ballista bolt had the power to transfix multiple soldiers in a single, gruesome line, pinning them to the ground like macabre trophies. A stone projectile could smash through a wooden siege tower or scatter a tightly packed group of attackers, turning organized advances into panicked chaos. For the defenders on the walls, the ballista was a weapon of precise intimidation. They could target enemy commanders from an impossible range or systematically destroy valuable siege equipment before it ever reached the walls. The sound of its firing mechanism engaging, the whistle of its massive projectile in flight, and the devastating impact created a symphony of dread for any army foolish enough to approach. It was artillery in its purest form, a machine that did not just kill men, but shattered their courage from hundreds of yards away. A farm tool left in a field overnight could become a weapon of rebellion by morning. The war scythe is a powerful symbol of desperation and defiance, born when peasants had no access to fine steel, only the implements of their daily labor. To create one, a blacksmith would take the blade of a harvesting scythe and reforge it, hammering it straight so that the long, curved cutting edge projected forward from a wooden pole, parallel to the ground, instead of pointing down toward the earth. This simple, brutal modification transformed a tool for cutting wheat into a weapon for cutting down men. In the hands of a farmer, it was a familiar weight, a length of wood he knew how to swing with force and precision. The reoriented blade was fearsomely effective, acting like a long, heavy glaive that could deliver deep, slashing wounds, and its sharp point could be used for desperate thrusts. But the true power of the war scythe was never in its refined craftsmanship. It was a weapon of the people, a clear statement that when pushed to the brink, the common man would turn the very instruments of his oppression into the means of his liberation. It featured prominently in uprisings across Europe, from the bloody Jacquerie in France to the great peasant revolts in Germany and England. Waving a war scythe was both a practical choice and a profound act of political theater. It represented a world turned upside down, where the tiller of the soil became the reaper of knights. These makeshift militias were often doomed, facing professional men at arms with little more than courage and converted tools. Yet the enduring image of the war scythe poses a haunting question. In a world defined by the knight's sword and the master's whip, was there ever a weapon that carried a sharper, more poignant meaning for those who had nothing left to lose? From the desperate fields of peasant revolt, we return to the saddles of professional warriors. The horseman's pick was a cavalryman's answer to the same problem that plagued the foot soldier: how to defeat a man encased in steel. This weapon, also known as a war hammer for the cavalry, was a masterpiece of focused brutality. Its design was elegantly simple, a short haft that could be wielded easily from the saddle, topped with a head that combined two tools. On one side was a compact hammer face, delivering the same concussive shock as a mace. But the true terror of the weapon lay on the opposite side, a sharp, often curved pick that tapered to a vicious point. This was not a weapon for slashing or swinging wildly. Its entire purpose was the precise application of overwhelming force. A rider galloping past an enemy knight would not aim for the broad breastplate, but for the helmet. The curved pick was perfectly shaped to bite into the rounded steel of a sallet or bassinet, and the momentum of the horse would do the rest, transferring immense energy through the point to punch a hole straight through the metal. The effect was not just a wound, but a guaranteed incapacitation, a single, decisive strike that could end a fight against even the most heavily armored foe in an instant. This weapon found its greatest favor with the cavalry of Eastern Europe and the Middle East, particularly among the Ottoman Sipahis and the Polish winged hussars. For these highly mobile horsemen, the pick was a perfect sidearm, a tool that complemented their lances and sabers by giving them a reliable means to dismantle armored opponents at close quarters. Its efficiency speaks to a cold, practical truth of medieval warfare. In the end, the most celebrated suit of plate armor could be undone by the concentrated impact of a single, well-aimed point driven home from the back of a galloping horse. Amidst this arsenal of lethal tools, one weapon stands apart by its very purpose. The mancatcher was designed not to kill, but to capture. This peculiar polearm featured a long wooden shaft topped with a pair of crescent-shaped, spring-loaded metal arms. When an opponent, typically a mounted knight, charged within reach, the wielder would thrust the device forward, causing the two arms to snap shut around the man's neck or torso. The inside of these arms were often lined with blunt spikes, not to pierce flesh, but to prevent the captive from easily wrenching himself free. Imagine the shock of a fully armored knight, invulnerable to sword strokes, suddenly being snared by such a device and unceremoniously yanked from his saddle. His great strength and expensive armor were now his prison, leaving him helplessly pinned and immobilized on the ground. This made the mancatcher an incredibly valuable tool on the battlefield, but for a very specific and lucrative reason: the capture of nobles for ransom. A dead lord was worth nothing, but a live one was a walking fortune. Securing a high-value prisoner meant a huge payday for his captors, a practice that turned warfare into a profitable business for many knights and mercenaries. Beyond the chaos of war, the mancatcher found a second life in the hands of town watchmen and constables. It was the perfect non-lethal tool for apprehending a dangerous individual, especially one armed with a sword or dagger, allowing the law to subdue a suspect from a relatively safe distance. This dual use for both profit and peacekeeping highlights a fascinating truth about the medieval world. Even in an age defined by violence, there was a place for a weapon that valued a live captive over a dead enemy, proving that sometimes the greatest power lay not in destruction but in restraint. From the mancatcher's clever restraint to the greatsword's overwhelming power, this journey across the medieval arsenal reveals a world of stunning ingenuity. These 25 weapons were not just tools of destruction. They were the physical expressions of a society defined by conflict, status, and technological change. They tell a story of knightly ideals embodied in the cruciform, longsword, and the couched lance, symbols of chivalry that could also shatter bone and pierce plate. They speak to the practical realities of the common soldier, whose spear and billhook turned. Bill gave him a fighting chance against armored nobility. We see the brutal physics of the mace and war hammer, designed to crush what they could not cut, and the mechanical revolution of the crossbow, a weapon so effective it was feared by the church itself. Each piece in this lethal puzzle, from the humble sling to the massive ballista, played its part in shaping the tactics, the social order, and the very landscape of medieval warfare. This was an era where a farmer's tool could become a symbol of rebellion, and a simple piece of curved steel could define an entire culture's way of war. So now we turn the question to you. After this tour through the forges and battlefields of history, which of these 25 essential weapons do you find the most fascinating, the most ingenious, or simply the most brutally effective? Share your thoughts in the comments